Well, that introduction was almost longer than my brief, so thank you very much. But despite all that, in the end, my dad's a farmer outside Mandan, and I was on the tractor a couple weeks ago working for him. So add to that a farm hand for my dad. But thanks so much for including me. I have a few notes that when I realized the audience was as knowledgeable as you are, I had a few more notes. So if you see me carrying paper, I do have everything electronically as well. But I just can't tell you enough of how excited I am about the time in which we live. I hope you are feeling that way. And there are some theorists about technology who argue, and I think they've got good credibility. One of them co-founded Wired magazine, but also was one of the earliest people with this thing called the Whole Earth Catalog, which is about healthy living and organic food. A guy named Kevin Kelly. Then in his latest book, The Inevitable, which is about technology, he said, without any humor, he said, the people alive now are the most important people alive in the history of the world. And the reason for that, I'll get into, is the field you're in. Intelligent machines, networks, knowledge that is moving across what I will argue is autonomy at rest, which is big data, but also now autonomy in motion. Machines moving into our lives, the UAS being tested right up here in North Dakota, as well as Google driverless cars. You read about Tesla, but I'll show you something that's going to be happening here in North Dakota. But that's his view of how important this is. Now, at the same time, there may be people, your family and others, who are also part of this transition. You're an elite, just so you know. You have a huge responsibility, so I'm going to put some heavy weight on you here in a second. But one of my favorite quotes of a theorist of technology, James Benninger, I made all my students reread the first line of his book. Sadly, he died at a young age, but his book was called The Control Revolution, which is about basically your industry and how it began with the mail system and eventually the telegraph and then what we have today. And we're going through these periods of crisis and chaos, and then you got control again, then it speeded up again. His favorite line, and I'll butcher it here in case you call the book and are reading it simultaneously, basically he said, one of the great tragedies of human existence is we are all part of these transformations of which most of us have no idea they happened until we're gone. And they play out in our lives. And it's now happening at a speed where I would say, at least the people in this room, are realizing it within their lifetime, within their career. But I think some of you probably have grandparents that literally could have gone through a whole career doing kind of the same job. And those days are over. The predictions on workforces, you may have several careers in the lifespan, and then lifespans actually are increasing. So you can see the dilemma that you all face in your workforce, that people are living longer, technology is changing faster, and so how do people adapt to that? So to put a little weight on you all, is in our state, we have wonderful industries that have been here a long time. Again, my family homesteaded in the 1880s. We still have the family farm. It's a small farm now. We were blessed with several generations of big families, and my great-grandfather was very progressive, and all 10 of the kids got an equal share, so we're small farmers. But this new economy that's emerging, our state still hasn't quite engaged that. So the people in this room, I think you have a responsibility to teach people, tell people what you do, maybe not share their trade secrets, of course, serve on the boards, serve on school boards, integrate into teaching as adjuncts in the colleges or in the K-12. There's a major initiative on K-12 technology education, but also advocate with your legislators. Are there any legislators in the room by chance? It's like a blinding light here. Okay, yeah. See, some of you should be legislators, okay? I mean, I'm just being very blunt. We have lots of legislators who are farmers. One of my cousins by marriage was long-term legislator, and he's a dairy farmer, wonderful person. But there's only a couple IT legislators that I know of, and we need to have more because the world is changing, and I think North Dakota is incredibly well positioned to benefit for what's happening in the world, and I'll touch on that a little bit. So, to get even a little heavier, is that you're living in this epic time, and remind me not to get off the stage without mentioning some things we're doing as far as the classroom, because I do want to let you know that we are adapting technology in the classroom, but I realize you're technologists from all over industry, so to talk about classroom technology would not be really best use for you. But what is happening here is going to change the whole structure of society. It's going to change business. You're already seeing it in your industries. But when I talk to non-technical audiences, I'd say this way. I said, what would you say to me if I told you that 1 billion people are immigrating to North Dakota? Would that have implications for industry, education, infrastructure? If you had a explosion in the birth rate and we're going back to 10 kids a family, wouldn't you say we're going to have big implications that go on beyond just the IT people? Yes. Well, that's what I'm getting to, is we're having an explosion in intelligent algorithms, machines, and this is going to upend how things work. It won't eliminate a bunch of stuff, which I'll show, it's additive, but it is going to come at a time at such speed that you're really out-of-the-box thinkers. I really encourage you to empower them and be sure they're thinking ahead. And so that's what we'll be talking about. And when we talk about it basically in a macro way, I guess you're seeing the screens up here, but two big revolutions: unmanned systems, which are intelligent machines in motion, intelligent data at rest, algorithms. These are happening at the same time, and I'll explain to you what I mean by macro revolution. But to make it even more difficult is, for the first time, machines can be taken control of and hacked. The Watt steam engine was never at risk with his flyball governor, which, if you think about it, was an amazing machine. 2 pieces of dead iron came alive when they put steam through it, and it began to control a machine. Never before happened on the planet. In the lectures I give to students, I just put that picture of that thing up and said, inanimate matter came to life and began to control a machine. But nobody could hack the thing, right? You had to walk down and pull the switch. And now, as you're seeing in the news, this cyber challenge is really going to be a major challenge, and many of you I know are already working it. So what I'll eventually develop here for you is a framework, and this brief has been given, it's been building for about 10 years, actually. I didn't go through my whole military background, but I worked for a guy named Don Rumsfeld and Paul Wolfowitz, if you remember their names, but they're the ones who got us into the wars in Iraq and whatnot, and I was a military assistant there, and things started to go wrong rapidly. And as I was leaving, an incoming admiral said, you should try to capture what you saw. How could we get this so wrong? And this framework actually was derived from that. And you'll see a couple of military slides. But what we'll get to is deriving this basically framework of the world now emerging. And what you see on the bottom is social human activity, which still will go on. It's happening in this room. If you weren't looking at your iPhone, we're interacting as human beings. With example, if I took this microphone off and just yelled, we're interacting at a social human scale. You still do this in your families, but that was the main structure of society. We then began to integrate with machines. We'll talk about that. And now we are creating in completely autonomous machines, which will become part of the economy, machines talking to machines. Overlaid over the whole thing is a massive, intelligent web that's coming alive in some people's minds. And penetrating from every angle is cyber attacks, corruption of data, crime, countries. In some countries, they're considered legitimate businesses. So that's the framework we'll come back to, and then I'll talk about what the university system's doing. And then I want to have time for questions, because all the expertise here, I'd hope to get some thoughts from you. So what we're doing in the university system, just so you know, is we're doing a lot of stuff, trying to run a budget, trying to keep many of your kids, in a safe, secure environment, which this day and age is just stunning that we have the things that are happening on campuses. So we're doing all that stuff. But we are also having a major technology initiative called Nexus North Dakota, which is the intersection of unmanned systems, big data, cybersecurity, and we are working with you to try to diversify our economy. If we ever needed any evidence, it's the downturn in energy and ag at the same time. Potentially our new governor is saying it. I've heard Senator Heitkamp stand on the stage saying we've got to get a third leg of our economy, and that's, again, where the pressure's on you and me and others, and this is one of our initiatives to do that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that if there's time, some of the things we're doing in the nexus of those things. And if I could just raise a hand, how many are in the Red River Valley here? You raise your hands? Okay. And I know we got Minot, whatnot, but we've got some great, hub areas where a lot of this stuff is already happening, and we want to be partners by higher ed. Okay, so this is the bottom line up front, is you are living in a time of 2 macro events, okay? And so let me take a second to distinguish between what other people might say, and it might happen to you. If you have maybe a grandfather or a former mentor, I had one, a retired 4-star admiral, when I was saying, this is getting really big. And this brief, by the way, has been given to the Defense Science Board, Yale University, Cybercom, NSA, The Navy's off-site, the Army's off-site, the governor's task force. You're getting a pared-down version that actually went to the Economic Committee, NDSU. But anyway, he came up and he said, you know, Mark, we went through tough times going from propeller to jet. Well, what he experienced was a micro revolution, like microeconomics, going from manual transmission to automatic. You had to change curriculum, you changed some cars, you eventually changed most cars. You went from propeller to jet, you changed the flight schools, the same pilots flew, the skill sets modified. There's lots and lots of micro events happening, right? Going from a floppy drive to, you know, the hard ones to the flash drive. These are all things accumulating, but history shows that when these inventions keep coming together, you have a change, almost like water to ice or water to steam, and these are macro events that upend everything. And we are now having two of these happening at the same time. One of them related to robotics and machines working in society, and I'll show you how this adds up, and then this massive cyberspace. So as a recovering historian of technology, having read a lot of this stuff, so I ran networks in the Navy, reactors, but then the Navy invested, and I went back and they said, study technology. That a short list of things, when these events happen, we have to do three things. One, and you are in the first two of these, create the technology, create new patents, create new wealth, make life better. That's a competitive thing. You know, if Watt would have stopped with his steam engine, they'd been, you know, replaced by the Germans or us very quickly. The British had to keep innovating. Eventually, we did eclipse them as a key innovation engine. But that's a race that you're in right now in your fields and in this area. Secondly, in red, what is unique is you never had to worry about someone 8,000 miles away coming into your hospital and taking your data out. And this is epic stuff. If I had more of my cyber brief here, I would have an entire page of all the cyber attacks that are becoming unprecedented. And I know we have medical people right here, but not 10 miles from where I was last stationed before I came back home, hackers took over a hospital. Do people know that? They took over a hospital in Baltimore. Even the hackers in the dark web condemned what they did because it was an attack on elderly people, people who were in the cancer ward. They had to run around with clipboards. They lost patients. They had people call the police because they weren't, the workers weren't even memorizing where's Aunt Jenny anymore, right? It was all on a little scan card, and they weren't putting face to name. So it is unprecedented. I think you've heard you can hack pacemakers from a distance. The Ukrainian election, people don't know this. When Trump is saying the election could be stolen, he could say it better, and I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, but the Ukrainian election was within hours stolen by the Russians. Some computer scientists, like many of you are, was looking at the data before they released the results in 2014 and discovered the Russians had clicked the numbers over. So when they keep saying, well, we have paper ballots, we can go back, what if you don't even know it was hacked, right? I mean, you're going to check every paper ballot, 150 million of them. You may not even know that you were hacked. And so this control, the cyber problem, I've just actually blogged just yesterday on LinkedIn that I think this may become the crucial challenge right now, and everything else is going to begin to slow down. These other things I'm talking about because of that. The third bullet is if we have any lawyers in the room or any social scientists or your spouses are involved or you're not on the school board, that History of Technology shows, one of my favorite books, is called Civilizing the Machine. You're in a camp of none other than Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, who were technologists of their day when, guess what was being imported? The steam engine. And our great-great-grandfathers were very thoughtful people, and as was Abigail Adams. They thought about this stuff. And they thought, how are we going to make life better because of this? But again, to put more pressure on you all, so when I leave, they go, we don't want him back, he keeps putting pressure on you. It didn't take long for farmers to look at a steam engine and see what it could do. They quickly began to adapt things, right? Mechanical advantage, the McCormick Reaper. If you saw my TED Talk, it's all about the Hagerott family adapting to steam engine technology outside Mandan. But our forefathers were very concerned about what it would do to people, their livelihood. Well, I would submit to you today, unless you have expert knowledge, it is very hard to understand what's happening. So again, a little more pressure on you all to help our society work its way through. And I'm here to help you. But I have these conversations, and I can just see the glazed look when it goes over people's head that we actually need courses in cyber law. What does that mean? What is the liability of you all? Even some corporate C-suites that were hacked. I was just talking about this with some gentlemen here at the table. it was because people like you didn't get into the executive suite to warn them about something. You were organized out, and the company almost goes bankrupt because the knowledge did not get in. My opinion, being a Navy guy, that person should have been pounding on the door to get in the room to help talk to them about the implications on some of these. So this is the bottom line up front. Let me go through a couple of other things here and we'll talk about it. Okay, so this slide's purpose is to tell you that this is not like the CB radio thing that's just going to go away. That this argument of machines becoming a whole separate part of the economy is a trajectory of history. So human society, and I just was at Mary University day before yesterday giving this brief, and they immediately figured this out. They used biblical references. Human society was structured around sensing, thinking, and acting. All right, that's all machines are doing that. All people are doing that. That's the common thread. Sense your environment, think about it, and act on it. The whole world, roughly with the rise of agriculture, was built on humans and animals doing that. Okay? And one of the Mary University students in his Catholic college said, yeah, the Israelites were slave labor. They were slave labor for the Egyptians. And then someone said, yeah, the Romans, right. The whole Roman thing was built on slave labor. That system eventually was supplanted. Thank God, literally thank God for your predecessors, engineers who built steam engines and industrial equipment. And interesting, when did the whole American society upend? Was the Industrial Revolution, and a slave-based culture ended in war, basically. But it was machines that liberated these people, right? It upended an entire culture that was built on slave labor. Well, I have the date 1588 that it wasn't just the Industrial Revolution. In the military, it happened around 1588, and entire empires fell because people like you did not get into the king's office in Spain. But people like you got into Queen Elizabeth's office, and this was called the Battle of the Armada. And before you judge the Spaniards too bad, what it was the Spanish fleet came up against the English fleet. The Spanish had stopped the Muslim invasion of Europe just a half a generation before in 1571 with mass labor. Just mass labor. You'd see it in the movie, the old Ben-Hur movie, Charlton Heston on those galleys, right? Human labor, rowing those boats, human labor fighting. The English ship captains, they're engineers of their time, and ships were the most advanced technology at the time, got into Queen Elizabeth saying, you know what? The war that's now coming in 1588, a mere half generation later, we are going to use cannons, not human beings. We need to change how we think about war. And when the Spanish fleet sailed to attack England, they had thousands of infantrymen waiting to board and fight. The English didn't carry a single soldier. They changed their doctrine. They did not let the ships come close, and they pounded the Spanish to bits and changed the history of the world because people like you got into a completely non-technical person, Queen Elizabeth, who was the child queen, basically, and were able to convince them the world was changing, and they were this far ahead of the Spaniards because a mere 17 years before, that is how they fought. So I can just tell you right now, I don't have the slides here, but other briefs I think one of you might have seen, there's lots of military stuff of what your colleagues are doing back in the Pentagon, rapidly studying these transitions, because the point here is a micro event can be handled by getting it wrong and you can adapt. But if you're having a macro event like we are, from human power to integrated to now, you can see the third one is autonomous machines, whole countries can collapse. Whole societies have collapsed. The evidence we have for this one is 100 years ago this year. While a guy like Roosevelt out in the Badlands and a guy named Muir established the national parks to preserve national parks from industrialization, right? You're going from human agriculture to industrial scale changing society, and they preserved Yellowstone, preserved these places. Does anybody know what happened 100 years ago in the military? Any military historians here? What was going on 100 years ago? The First World War. Your predecessors, the machine experts, did not get into the rooms of the kings and the senior generals, and we sent literally millions of young men with Napoleonic tactics against things called machine guns. Now, they quickly began to adapt, and the reason I say this year was particularly profound is finally, after millions had died, they developed the tank against another machine. The tank was against the machine gun. And the military adapted, but they adapted so late that they lost 4 empires. The Austrians collapsed, the Germans collapsed, the Russians collapsed, the Turks collapsed. Entire societies that a mere 3 years before were like our country, and they literally were in revolution So if you don't think this changed fast in the past, 1588, the battle was resolved in 3 days, the world changed, because you didn't see the shift from human to machine. On infantry fields, it shifted in about 3 years that literally collapsed entire societies because of an error on sending humans against machines. Well, now it's happening again, and I still serve as a non-resident fellow. There are several groups right now being established on autonomous machines throughout Air Force, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, because they see how fast it's coming. The Russians and Chinese have already gone on record that, quite frankly, they're going to build completely robotic machines that will hunt anything they want. The United States, by the way, is trying to stay on the high side and build just machine-killing machines and not hunt humans. So I think in our country, we're going to try to go the high road, but we have two opponents that really don't have any inhibitions of what's coming. And we are talking about billions flowing into this. So what I have, though, for you there, the pictures are the commercial applications. So we do have a major military presence here in Fargo, if you don't know that, but also at Grand Forks and Minot. Huge engine, Minot. We're talking $800 million into the economy. That one of my tasks as the university system is how to help the Air Force adapt to this. We have the best test center in the country. So there is a military component here. I know you're not a military audience, so the pictures are commercial applications, and that's what I'll show you coming up. But that's just one of the things happening. Intelligent machines moving into three-dimensional space that can create wealth, can do work, but also in the military are going to give us a run for our money. The second one is this, the emergence of intelligence at rest, the internet. This is coming so fast that I actually have met and shaken hands with two of the people who took those hands. I mean, this is how much of a technology hobbyist I am. I almost wanted to take a photo of their hands. But Craig Fields and Vince Cerf were there when the internet came alive. They were a couple of the DARPA engineers, and they actually were guys that helped put the cables together. So think about that. The internet we have alive today, and that's the image, the transition, the upper left is 1980. So if you had a class on IT, you could reasonably have a final exam question telling your students, list the 50 nodes of the internet. If you get to a 50, it's 100%. If you get, 35, it's a 70%, okay? I mean, you could do a nodal analysis on the internet in 1980, and, I was actually in college in 1980. I could have taken that exam. That's an image of the internet in the last 10 years. It is becoming this virtual cyberspace of business, inventions, ideas, people living on it. But anyway, I actually met these two people who put these cables together. They're alive right now. So within a generation, we have created a whole new space of activity. And this space of activity is generating wealth. Any gamers here? Anybody go in the game world? You can raise your hand. I hope there's some gamers out of this industry. Good, good. I mean, you have even more pressure on you, okay, to help explain this to the rest of us. But for those who don't know, real money now is coming to the game world. People are actually now making a living as a gamer, meaning that they have to live in the real world, which is why I believe the most profound risk and opportunity is machines that move into our space that was human-dominated, because cyberspace is not going to kill you unless you plug a heart machine into it, which they might do in some games, right? Actually plug your heart in, and if you lose, I mean, seriously, I've heard people speculate. You want to have real skin in the game in these cyber games, then you plug in the heart stimulator and it stops your heart. And I wouldn't go into that game myself. But anyway, in cyberspace, real money is coming into cyberspace. Buying, if someone wants to sell out, like one of the people here who's built his status in cyberspace and wants to back out, they can get bought out like you'd buy a house. You buy their stuff, their tokens, their property, and so this is emerging. But it's emerging in a scary way. If you can see the bottom words down there, the Internet of Things. We're moving so fast on efficiency, and this could be a huge opportunity for you all. Just securing what some estimates are 20 billion devices will be plugged into the Internet of Things, washing machines, dryers, refrigerators. And how many followed the major outages about 10 days ago? Anybody follow the major outages? Okay, some of you might have. I saw the map. It was mainly the East Coast and West Coast. We seem to be better in the middle. But pretty serious people are saying it was unprecedented. And I'm always on the lookout when someone says something's unprecedented. But an unprecedented attack on a domain name server, the thing that actually directs web traffic. But But in some cases, major sites were down for 8 hours. I mean, think how much business, if you're a web-based business and you're down. So this is real stuff, and it's happening. So taken together, this is the world that I would say you are going to contend with. And that is the emergence of the autonomous machine realm right here in our state. If I was giving this brief in, let's say, Arkansas, they probably would glaze over, but you all have been reading this. North Dakota with some visionaries is way ahead. We have one of the biggest FAA-approved test sites. We're trying to move beyond line of sight. We've got major corporations coming in here, which will then have subcontractor work. And so it's happening right here, but it's happening across the world. Major arms races are tooling up. And for those from Minot and Grand Forks, if there's an arms race, there will be business, okay? I mean, it's my dad, and I'll talk about him in just a second. Well, I'll talk about it now. My dad was in agriculture. And the beginning of this emergence of intelligent machines and whatnot got him out of poverty, basically. And it was because some of your predecessors were visionary enough to talk to him when he married my mom, and they were farming outside Mandan, and they had the farm. And don't judge my grandfather, but agriculture was the basis of the economy for 10,000 years. And after the crop came in, they had 8 mouths to feed, my mom and dad, my brother, I wasn't born yet, my uncle, my aunt, who had a medical disability, grandpa, grandma, and they were just barely making it. And my dad said, you know, I'm working with this guy at Mandan Electronics in Mandan. I'd been in the Navy, and I've taken one class at BJC, Bismarck Junior College, and they said, I can make money off this. Anybody recognize what that is from here? Anybody guess? It's a vacuum tube, okay? It is the foundation of the digital revolution. It's actually as fast as, you know, a microchip at the speed of light, but awfully big and bulky. And I'm told the conversation did not go well with my grandfather, okay? I think he might have used swear words. Because it was like you make wealth out of agriculture and maybe the machine shop in Mandan, but you're going to make wealth out of a flashing light, okay? But in the end, my dad then ended up at several of the missile silos, Kansas, Nebraska, Cheyenne Mountain, went to Alaska. My brother and I were at Mandan with my mom. But he created enough wealth that he then came back for the good life, bought into the farm. He's farming today. But this is going to happen again, this transition into this new realm of things that seem ridiculous to your colleagues who are not in this information field, but you have a responsibility, much like that professor at BJC, that businessman at Mandan Electronics, to mentor a young farm boy that, hey, it's changing and you're pretty good at this, because the other people were telling him stuff that, quite frankly, was outdated. Farming's still there, it transitioned, but this whole new field created wealth with a flashing bulb. Then again, the kicker here is all this stuff can be attacked and hacked through cyberspace. So, just some images to show you. I don't want it to be completely military-centric, but once I realized we had some Minot, Grand Forks people here, that you have a responsibility, I think, to connect with those communities, advocate. I think we've got a pretty strong advocacy there, but North Dakota should really shoot high as a major hub for military testing and deployment of unmanned systems technologies. So how would this apply to the military? All right. There's the 3 realms splitting out. They're additive, right? At the bottom is human-centered warfare. This is happening still with ISIS. Afghanistan, I served in Afghanistan. There's no substitute. I mean, an Afghan tried to humiliate me and another officer when we had one of our jets fly over, and he goes, that's fine, you can fly at, you know, high speed. What are you doing to protect my daughter here? Well, that's what that is there. Soldiers and sailors, you know, policing, communities, that will still be a center of activity. But the integration of human and machine in the military is huge, will continue that way, and the emergence, of course, of unmanned systems. And so that's what the graph is on the left, is the higher in the square is more automated, lower is more human-centered. So you can apply it to agriculture. This is emerging right now for us. I should have the Elbit track Hermes 450, but human animal-centered still goes on. We have a major livestock industry. I don't think that's going to go away. But automated GPS tractors working with human beings, but then completely autonomous machines. North Dakota is now the forefront of testing the first Hermes 450 Elbit, major Israeli company, here in North Dakota, testing our fields, and I'll show you some slides real quickly of the data analytics challenge of that. So it's happening right here. Other states, they wouldn't think they would apply. It does apply here. Energy, XL Energy. Anybody here from XL Energy? So I'll just give you a free advertisement. They have just awarded a major grant with our university system to study using drones in a completely autonomous way with a power grid. All right? I mean, as a ship captain, I had to climb up a mast of a ship, pitching and rolling, because if my sailors had to do it, I wanted to do it. It was terrifying. I'm not a heights guy. Okay. Think of all these guys and girls going up these towers to check during an ice storm and other things. Now, we can develop these drones that go up, take high-resolution photos, and then through your systems, the data comes down, we diagnose, and then we send people when we have to. And of course, the other stuff will continue, human-integrated machines, and they'll still be just human-centered, but probably power is going to go less and less human and more automated and integrated. Now, overlaid this, so I'm deriving that chart I showed you, overlaid all this is we have plugged just about everything into the internet, okay? So overlaid all this is the massive intelligent web, which is wonderful because it gives us big data analytics, right? Managing a grid, everything's all connected. We now know where the flows are. But this now becomes a vector for a cyber attack. And if some of you Googled my name when I was working the deputy director, I got out ahead a little bit and I got some flack. I was actually in a thing called the Drudge Report. We know what the Drudge Report is? But basically, I was on a panel saying, what would be a showstopper? What could be a showstopper in the field of cyberspace? And I said, you know, knowing a lot how the ships are run, that if you could jump the air gap, entire fleets could come to a stop. Because if you didn't know if you were infected or not, believe me, you might turn the fleet away just while you sorted it out. And people said, wow, wild speculation, et cetera. Thank God I was saved by 2 researchers in Israel that they demonstrated, and some of you are nodding your head, that there is a way to jump in small data rates the air gap if a machine is basically vulnerable. And so even the air gap in some cases now can be jumped. And so on many U.S. Navy ships, I'll tell you this, you can't even take cell phones in. You can't even take them on the ship because the possibility that there's some device running, the virus jumps. They've done some research to show a virus can go all the way from Boston to North Carolina through all the little Wi-Fi webs of all the houses, you know, the car driving along and all the rest, that a virus now could jump all the way down the coast, okay? So that's what that overlay is. And so it affects the military to the point that it was unclassified at the time, so I can say this, but I read the guidance that went out to the Navy, if you don't think how serious this is, that they sent out guidance to all the ship captains about a year ago saying, report one of 4 statuses of your ship. Are you fully network enabled? Because the Navy loves networks. It was actually the first ever digital mobile network was the Navy. No offense to Air Force, you were behind. It was the Navy. Network enabled, that's how you want to fight, right? This ship's having trouble, we can cover for you, but you have to communicate. Network degraded. You know, the USS South Dakota's in trouble, so we're going to go off the net, we're going to isolate them so our network's degraded. Next was, can you stand alone, fight alone? Meaning, okay, your own systems are okay, but the network's now compromised. And this one sent a chill down my spine. The last status, and the Navy is not prone to hyperbole, they said, can you report, quote, I can get home, unquote. Meaning they wanted to cut through all the confusion, say, can you turn the rudder and keep the engine going? So those were 4 categories of reports you had to make because of a lieutenant, Tyson Maters, who I knew, had a hypothesis that, you know what, someone could walk on a ship and hack the whole ship. No one believed him. The Chief of Naval Operations gave him and a team money, go test this. I never saw the report, but I know his report was classified, top secret, within 10 minutes of briefing the senior admirals. So you can speculate what the lieutenant discovered. But it took a lieutenant challenging people my age, saying, I think we can do it. And so that's real, and I encourage some of you, if you're not working already with companies that work with the Air Force, they're going to need help working through these problems. Same with agriculture. GPS-controlled combines, tractors, right? I mean, think about all the vulnerability we have on that. We have computerized seeders. I'll show some of the stuff we're doing if we get time to it. So the cybersecurity of agricultural equipment, you know, who is a leader in that, okay? Not everybody will be able to go to John Deere. I'm sure they have a service, but maybe someone else can be a provider for things. You know, I mean, my dad has equipment from John Deere, Massey Ferguson, Case, you know. He's not going to make everything John Deere, so who can integrate across that? And some of you probably think that, but if you don't know, Facebook, one of its biggest purchases was a thing called WhatsApp. Is all WhatsApp was, about 30 engineers, and all they did was interoperability between platforms. That's all they did. They bought them for $18 billion. So I think there could be a market here as well. Okay, energy, we already talked about that. There's no higher target than the power grid by enemies. Okay, the governor has established a task force on cybersecurity. I sat in one of the tabletop exercises. It wasn't classified. But with North Dakota, with the weather we have, hacking energy systems, even down to home systems, is a non-laughing matter. In Mississippi, okay, you can't turn the coffee pot on in the morning, but this is epic stuff, and it was pretty serious discussions of what would you do if the grid is down. Literally, who's off the grid, who has resilient technology, which power plants would stay up, which diesels would come up, okay? So serious stuff applying this framework. Great opportunities to make money, be efficient, but also huge opportunities to go into the whole security business securing this. Okay, to summarize again, you're a wonderful time to be alive. You are going to have it on your shoulders to create this new, amazing third realm of activity, machines, autonomous systems, machines talking to machines. I'm convinced the day is coming. Machines will sell to machines, all right? And will you guys be able to keep the network running in the face of the big data that will inform the machines? And then will you be able to compete at a rate where you can build market share? Will you then secure the technology, and then in your other lives, on boards, at schools, talking to your legislators, the other part, civilize the technology, make it better for us all. And I really believe you all are just a priceless asset. Don't too many of you get in an elevator at a time, because we could probably measure the loss to our economy. But people who are in this field, who understand it, and obviously are engaged, because you really need to help the rest of our state and legislators understand this. So I have 5 minutes left, but just real quickly, what we're doing in our state, and if you further engage in this whole field of supporting our universities, we're not alone. All these organizations are going big time into unmanned systems, cybersecurity. Our own National Guard has now been designated a cyber protection team for the upper Midwest. So please don't steal those people away from the National Guard. Okay, they've got to build that cadre. Maybe your people can be National Guard employees for that. Defense Science Board, the major report, of which I was an author of many, was on autonomous systems. They study lots of things. Their major report just came out in August, and they said one of the biggest challenges will be counter-autonomy, how to protect against rogue machines, enemy machines. So build a counter system. Think about aviation. Grand Forks was an intercept base for a while. Minot was a bomber base. So see that analogy even in North Dakota could be, we build offensive drones for the Air Force, we test them here, but we also defend here. Very analogous. Air Force, Navy, Department of Transportation, Energy, universities are going into this. What we have is such an advantage, is we have a great state with low taxes, low energy costs, 2 existing bases, a certified test center, research universities, and I would encourage you this, you don't need millions of people to do this, right? Highly skilled, automated workforces. So we really should strive to be a big part of this. So those are just some data points on that, unmanned systems. But I'll stop there and see if there's any questions. So these slides would get into what we're doing in the university system. $1 million grant pending for joint research with NDSU and UND on UAS research. We're doing ag research. We're doing energy research. And we're actually tomorrow taking a trip to Minnesota to look at their supercomputing center to see what we can take back here. So we're doing lots of stuff. And we're also going to ramp up the cybersecurity. We had record enrollment in our computer science departments to get more employees for you. And Bismarck State will be leading a 2-year program for cybersecurity. Hopefully be able to offer some courses for you so you don't have to go out of state to SANS or some of these other places. Maybe you could be adjunct teachers there, and they're near finalists for a $1 million grant. This is so urgent that the country is putting some big money behind it. So with that, I'll stop. I hope it was helpful to you. Just know in the classroom we're doing distance education using lots of technology, but I wanted to give you kind of the broader overview from my experience in some of these other settings. So questions on anything?
As we're heading into a legislative session here in a couple months, what are your top priorities? Anything for what you've just spoken about here or just otherwise from the university system?
Right. Yeah, it is going to be a tight legislative session. We want kids to be in the liberal arts, right? We don't want to be just told by the East and West Coast what we should think about music and art and history, right? I mean, if you don't believe there's a culture war going on, just tune in, right? So we need to maintain that. Steve Jobs was an artist, as well as a technologist. I'm a strong advocate of, not just STEM, but STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And the university system, in fact, some of you, we may ask you to join us. We are doing a long-term strategy effort called nVision 2030 to try to get out of just the day-to-day knife fight of how much money we're getting right now. We're trying to look ahead 15 years and go, what would we aspire to in North Dakota, and then back integrate this way. And one of the pillars is technology. Some others are very well defined. Agriculture has a seat at the table, energy, healthcare. We kind of know that trajectory. But manufacturing and technology, we got them on the short list to try to envision the future. So to me, my priority is keep doing what we have to do, keep your kids coming through, maybe your spouses, maybe you, get you what you need for existing things, but we have to help diversify the economy. So my main priority, if you're Senator Wardner and close the door, I'd say you've got to fund some of this stuff, IT-related stuff, IT workforce, research, because it's the third leg of our economy, agriculture, energy, and then technology. So if you can keep talking about that, these will be three priorities. But I know this technology will integrate into agriculture, medical care. It's all very relevant to diversify. All right. Well, thank you so much, and thanks for all the good work you're doing.